Welcome back, Helldivers. We have an interesting question for you today. What is more effective, the Jedi or the Sith when it comes to the battlefield? Well, we had to put two builds against each other, one for each, to see which will truly come out on top. And honestly, it was a lot of fun to do, so let's break it down. So first, we're going to have to take a look at who's getting the better weaponry to start off with, and starting out with primaries. Now, the Sith are taking the Blitzer to the battlefield for its crowd control, its force lightning that they are so fond of using, and then this thing is great for, armor penetrating. It gets all the way up to medium armor penetrating, and if you hold this thing down, it will do a little bit more damage than what it says on paper. So on paper, it says that it does 250, but with the infinite ammo and the charge up that you can do, it tends to pack a huge punch. Then as for the Jedi, I wanted to choose something that has a nice little oomph to it, and so I landed actually on the Slugger shotgun. Now, I know a shotgun Jedi doesn't really go, but I'm thinking, hey, it's got knockback force, kind of like a force push for the Jedi, so, maybe it works, whatever. But this thing's pretty good. It packs a punch of 320 base damage with medium armor penetrating as well, although the trade-off is a 16 ammo capacity, and it is kind of, single target fire. So the Sith might have a little bit of an upper hand being both single target and crowd control, depending on how you use the weapon. But hey, this thing definitely performs well on where we tested it for the bot front. Then as for the melee, we're pitting up the Saber for the Sith versus the Stun Baton for the Jedi. Now, they both have the same stats with medium armor penetrating and 6 recoil, but it's slashing damage versus stun damage for the Jedi. And honestly, after testing, I'm probably going to give this one up to the Jedi for it. Then on to the throwables now. I'm pitting two of my favorite grenades up against each other. It's going to be the Arc Thrower Grenade for the Sith, and then the Thermite for the Jedi. We went for the Jedi to have the Thermite because they're focusing on, precise, controlled damage. It's not going to be over the top, but still get rid of their enemy very quickly. And then for the Sith, because they're all about chaos and disorder and don't really care what happens to anyone, especially their friends, throwing out the little Arc Grenade and doing tons of damage around the AoE, so you have tons of AoE damage but doesn't destroy buildings, versus single target that kind of destroys everything. And when you're in the midst of the battlefield, I'm kind of going to put them on the same level of each other because depending what situation you are, either one will perform very well. So before we get into the nitty-gritty about the loadouts themselves, I wanted to talk about which one did I enjoy more. Well, on the one hand for the Sith, I love the absolute chaos that it brought. Shooting out the lightning, taking out the flying overseers and the voteless coming my way, throwing out those grenades, using the lasers, the 380s, all the good stuff, and of course using our Saber with the teleportation pack was a ton of fun. But then on the other side with the Jedi, they're also getting the teleportating pack, and they have the stun lance, which is a lot of fun to use against the bots. But then they're having, very explosive single target control and blowing up bases with the thermites. I'm making the force field to protect ourselves over here. We're calling in EMS strikes to kind of knock everyone down. And honestly, we were having a lot of fun, especially when I was getting a lot of men lined up for the Eagle strafing run. So before I truly reveal my decision on which one I enjoyed more, let's dive into those builds. So the Sith build is using medium armor. It's using the Exterminator set with the Cover of Darkness cape, and then for the stratagems, taking the orbital laser because, hey, maybe a destroyer or the Death Star itself is firing a laser down on the planet. Then because they love chaos, the 380 and all of its explosive value going out. Then for the warp pack so they could easily move in and around like a Sith could. And then something that'd be interesting, I took the Epoch because it has some very nice blast radius to it, and kind of seems like, sci-fi enough to be a Sith weapon. So in classic fashion, it started off in complete chaos, but we're able to warp around and make sure they're not going to get too bad, while as the enemies are coming in, keeping them at bay or destroying them completely with the Blitzer. It's doing tons of damage. And then when their hordes are getting to be a little bit too much, I'm throwing out the arc grenades and it's dispatching everyone, and even throwing out a 380 for good measure just to kind of have some good coverage. But as much as I was enjoying the Blitzer, I did run into my first challenge. After I'm mowing through these kind of chaff enemies, I get over to one of these control panels for the tower, and I'm not able to do actual damage with the Blitzer, which I actually wasn't aware of before I used it, so that is a little bit of a shortcoming. Then as for the Saber, this thing's a ton of fun to use. You could quickly dispatch the voteless aiming for the head and for the limbs, but when you use it in conjunction with the teleportation pack, you can do a ton of damage teleporting and slashing at the same time. Then as for the warp pack itself, being in a city area, this thing's a ton of fun to have because you can go through walls, you can go through fences, and it makes traversing very easy. But the star of the show is going to be the orbital laser for this one, because not only can it tear through all the different enemies that are up against you, but you could rip right through those enemy bases as well. Then as for our heavy weapon, which is the Epoch, this thing can be fully charged up, hitting a group of enemies and deleting them with one shot. But this build was a ton of fun to use, and I loved going on the Xenos planets, making chaos as I went as a true Sith would. Then as for our Jedi, we gave them the EMS strike as their first stratagem because this will be able to disable their enemies, then giving them the Eagle strafing run because this thing will obliterate pretty much anything in its way. It is heavy pen and this thing is a beast. Then giving them, of course, the Warpack as well because they can be nimble on their feet and use the baton in conjunction. Then, lastly, giving them the deployable force field because this thing is great, can buy you some time, and I think it kind of goes in line with their force powers. So once again, the Warpack with the baton is a great combo. I can teleport right into the base and give a smackdown on anyone trying to call in reinforcements, and it does their bang-up job. So not only is our Thermite wonderful at killing enemies like Hulks, but you could also attach it to the Fabricators to one-shot them as well. Wait for the timer and the big explosion, and you're done. Then as for our Slugger, it does a great job of knocking through the different Sawmen that are coming your way, hitting those Raiders that are charging you, and then even dispatching the Devastators, whether they have the shield or not to try to protect them. Aim at that head and you're going to dispatch them pretty quickly. Then our EMS strike, as we talked about before, you throw this thing out, you disable all the enemies, and then you go collect your loot or whatever you're going after. Then, of course, our shield generating pack. This thing is going to be protecting us from this nice hill over here as we call in the strafing run, destroying the base, and then once more calling in the strafing run to take out all the men that are charging at us and killing that patrol. So the Jedi loadout was also a lot of fun to use, but it felt a bit more targeted, a bit more surgical, and more precise, and I guess that's a bit more towards the Jedi Credo. So, friends, what did you think of it? Okay, time for the big reveal. Which did I find to be the stronger loadout on the battlefield? Was it the Sith with their full chaos and their Force lightning, or was it for the Jedi with their force fields and also their more precise control? Well, friends, after fighting on the Squid front and the Bot front, and feeling out both the builds in full, I'm probably going to have to give this one to the dark side. Yes, friends, I think the Sith are topping it. Even with the little drawbacks that they have, I thought that this one was a little bit more fun to use, and honestly, I think that you'd enjoy it more yourself. But if you're more about, hey, more precision and less chaos, go for the Jedi build. It is a wonderful build as well. But let me know your thoughts overall, and hey, you could change things up, make it your own playstyle, whatever it is. This is what I personally chose to bring to the battlefield, but hey, there you have it. Alright everyone, that's all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. As always, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it out because it helps us grow on the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.